Marcus Bennett left the envelope on the nightstand like it was a hotel checkout form. No argument, no warning, no final look back at the woman who had given him 12 years of her life. Just a cream-colored envelope with her name written in his careful handwriting, the same handwriting she had once loved, propped against the base of the lamp where she would find it when she woke up alone in a foreign country with no passport, no money, and no way home. He had planned every detail. He had chosen the hotel room, the floor, the timing. He had waited until she was deep in sleep before he moved. He had taken her passport from the inner pocket of her travel bag, removed her name from the joint bank account through an app on his phone, and walked out the door of their luxury suite in Seoul, South Korea, at 4:17 in the morning without making a single sound. Amara Bennett had spent 12 years being the quietest person in every room. Her husband used that against her one last time. If you have ever trusted someone completely and discovered they had been calculating your destruction while you slept, stay with this story. Because what happened next is not what Marcus Bennett expected, not even close. Subscribe to this channel and follow Amara's story all the way to the end. You will not want to miss what comes next. And if this story is reaching you, hit that like button and drop a comment below with your city and country. I want to see how far this story travels. Every single comment means something. Now, let's begin. The first thing Amara noticed was the light. Seoul's early morning pushed through the gap in the curtains in a pale, gray strip that fell across the carpet and stopped at the foot of the bed. She lay still for a moment, listening. Hotels always had sounds. The hum of climate control, the distant compression of elevator doors, footsteps in the corridor. This one was quiet in a way that felt wrong before she could name why. She reached across the mattress without opening her eyes. Cold sheets. Undisturbed pillow. Her hands stopped moving. She opened her eyes. The room looked exactly as it had when they had arrived the evening before, except for one thing. The chair near the window where Marcus always dropped his jacket, his ritual, the thing she had teased him about for a decade, was empty. His jacket was gone. His carry-on bag was gone. The pair of shoes he had set beside the closet were gone. Amara sat up slowly. She was not the kind of woman who panicked. She had learned early in life that panic cost you the seconds you needed most, and she had trained herself out of it the way some people train themselves out of biting their nails. She breathed through her nose, counted, and looked around the room with the same deliberate attention she gave to everything. That was when she saw the envelope. It was leaning against the base of the bedside lamp, and her name was written on the front in Marcus's handwriting. His real handwriting, the precise, controlled script he used when he wanted something to look thoughtful. She stared at it for a moment without reaching for it. Something in her body understood what it was before her mind caught up. She picked it up, opened it, read it standing beside the bed in her hotel robe with her bare feet on the carpet. The letter was 2 paragraphs. He had written that he needed space, that their marriage had not been working for some time, that he hoped she would understand, and that he had arranged for the hotel bill to be covered through the end of the week so she would not be inconvenienced. Inconvenienced. Amara read that word 3 times. She set the letter on the nightstand. She walked to the bathroom, filled a glass of water from the tap, and drank it standing over the sink. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long moment. Her face, her eyes, the particular stillness that people had always either admired or misread as coldness. And then she went back to the room and reached for her travel bag. Her passport was not in the inner pocket. She checked the outer pocket. The side zipper. The small compartment at the back she rarely used. She emptied the entire bag onto the bed, item by item, unhurried, though her hands had begun to feel strange. Not shaking, just distant, like they belonged to someone standing slightly behind her. No passport. She picked up her phone and opened her banking app. Access denied. Your account credentials have been updated. Please contact your branch for assistance. She sat on the edge of the bed. Outside the window, Seoul was waking up. She could hear it distantly. The city's particular version of morning, traffic and delivery vehicles, and the muffled language she did not speak filtering up through the glass. She was on the 14th floor of a hotel in a country where she knew no one, with no identification, no access to money, and a letter from her husband informing her that her presence in his life had become inconvenient. She sat there for 4 minutes. She counted them. Then she stood up, got dressed, and began thinking. Amara Bennett had not always been the composed woman people assumed she had always been. She had built that composure over decades, and she knew exactly what it cost. She had grown up in Baltimore, the middle daughter of a woman who believed that a black woman's dignity was the one thing no circumstance could take from her, which meant that composure in her household was not a personality trait but a survival skill. You did not fall apart in front of people who were looking for reasons to dismiss you. You felt everything fully, and you showed it on your own time, in your own space, on your own terms. By the time she was 22, she had internalized that lesson so completely that most people mistook her self-control for ease. They assumed nothing rattled her because she never let them see the rattling. What they did not understand was the discipline it took, every single day, to hold the line between feeling and performance. She had married Marcus at 31. He had been the first person who saw through the composure, or so she had believed. He had told her, early in their relationship, that he could see her thinking even when she was quiet. He said it like it was something he valued, her interior life, the way she processed the world. She had believed him. She had let herself believe that being seen clearly by someone was the same as being loved well. 12 years later, she understood the difference. What Marcus had actually learned to see was not her interior life. He had learned to read her patterns, where her attention went, what she avoided, what she valued enough to protect. He had cataloged her the way you might study a lock before trying to pick it. And when he finally decided to leave, he had used every piece of that knowledge against her. He knew she would not make a scene. He knew she would not call friends in a panic. He knew that she valued her dignity above almost everything else, and that the instinct to appear in control would slow her down long enough for him to get clear. He had calculated that she would spend the first 24 hours absorbing the situation quietly before she took any action. He was partially right. She did not make a scene. She did not call anyone in a panic. She held herself together with the same grip she had used all her life. But Marcus had made one fundamental miscalculation. He had confused her composure with passivity. Those were not the same thing. The South Korean embassy's emergency line connected her to a recorded message that cycled through a list of options. She worked through them methodically in her hotel room, a notepad open on the desk where she wrote down every name, every reference number, every piece of information that might be useful later. The American Citizen Services Unit had an appointment available in 3 business days. She took it. She wrote the date and time in her notepad and underlined it twice. Her hotel room was paid through Friday. That gave her 5 days. She sat at the desk and made a list, not of emotions, not of grievances. She made a list of resources. What she had? Her phone, charged. Her hotel key. The clothes in her suitcase. A small amount of Korean won she had exchanged at the airport on arrival. Enough for a few meals, not enough for a crisis. A notebook. 2 pens. The organizational skills of someone who had spent 11 years managing compliance departments at a financial firm before Marcus had convinced her, 3 years ago, that she should scale back so they could focus on his business growth. She stopped writing at that. She had scaled back. She had stepped back from a career that had been hers, built over years, because Marcus had framed it as a mutual decision about their future. She had believed that too. She had believed a lot of things. She started a second list. What she knew about Marcus's behavior over the past 18 months, not what she had suspected and dismissed, what she actually knew. The list was longer than she expected. The phone that was always screened down on the table. The business trips that had started accumulating in ways that did not entirely match the company's actual schedule. She had seen the travel receipts, had noted the inconsistencies, had asked once and accepted his explanation once, and then let it go because she trusted him. The increasing emotional distance that he had consistently reframed as her oversensitivity. The way he had started, slowly and subtly, inserting language into their conversations that suggested she was the source of the friction between them. She was too serious. She was too controlled. She never let herself be vulnerable. She wrote all of it down. By the time she finished, she had covered 4 pages. Then she went back to the beginning of the first page and read through it again, and what she saw was not the story of a marriage falling apart. What she saw was a pattern, a deliberate, long-running pattern that had been designed to move her incrementally toward a position of dependence while appearing to be a relationship. The scaling back of her career, the isolation from professional networks she had spent years building, the erosion of her financial independence, so gradual she had not noticed until the banking app told her she was locked out of money that had once been hers. Marcus had not decided to leave impulsively. He had been preparing this for a long time. The thought hit her at 11:30 in the morning while she was standing at the hotel window looking out at the city below. He had brought her to Seoul specifically, not Paris, not London, not somewhere with an English-speaking infrastructure and a community she might have known or a consulate she could walk to. Seoul, where she knew no one and could not read the street signs and did not speak the language and would have no social foundation to call on. He had chosen this city because he wanted her disoriented. He had wanted her standing at a hotel window in a foreign country, 11 time zones from home, with no passport and no money, overwhelmed enough that her first impulse would be to call him and ask him what to do. She pressed her palm flat against the glass. The city spread out below her in every direction, massive, indifferent, humming with traffic and commerce and 10 million lives that had nothing to do with her. For a moment, she felt the full weight of her situation settle into her body. Not panic, something heavier and more honest. The specific gravity of being alone in a way she had not chosen. She let herself feel it, all of it. She did not flinch from it or manage it or process it into something more presentable. Then she picked up her notepad and kept going. Well, by the afternoon of the second day, she had mapped out her immediate situation with the precision of someone conducting a professional assessment. She had spoken to the embassy. She had confirmed that emergency travel documentation was available but required processing time, and, in the interim, she was legally present in the country on a tourist visa that did not require her passport to be on her person at all times. The hotel held a photocopy. She had spoken to the hotel's front desk manager, a composed young man named Park Jun-seo, who had confirmed that the room was booked through Friday and that the reservation was tied to a credit card that was not in her name. That detail mattered. She filed it carefully. On the third day, she left the hotel. Not because she had a plan, because staying in the room felt like the kind of waiting that Marcus had counted on, and she was not willing to give him that. She walked. She had just enough won in her pocket to buy a cup of coffee and a small meal from a convenience store near the hotel. The city was overwhelming in the way that large foreign cities always were. Signage she could not read, conversations flowing around her in a language that moved differently in her ears than any other language she had encountered. She kept her pace steady and her expression neutral, and she watched everything. Watching had always been how she learned. She walked for 2 hours without a destination, mapping the neighborhood the way she used to map new professional environments, identifying resources, noting the locations of different businesses, reading the social geography of the streets. She found a small library branch with public internet terminals and sat there for an hour, translating documents and researching her legal situation, and almost accidentally searching Marcus's name alongside the name of his company. What she found there made her sit very still. His company had a South Korean subsidiary she had not known existed, registered 18 months ago, listed under a different director's name, but with a structure that, when she looked at it carefully, showed Marcus's organizational fingerprints, the specific way he arranged ownership layers and operational entities, the same patterns she had watched him build in their home country over years of being close enough to observe. He had not just been planning to leave her, he had been building a second life, and he had chosen Seoul as its home base. She sat back in the library chair and looked at the ceiling, the timing, the Korea trips over the past year that she had noted but not pushed back on. The way he had steered their conversations away from her career, away from her professional network, away from the kind of independence that would have made her harder to remove from the picture. He had been threading her out of her own life methodically, and when the time came, he had brought her directly to the city where his next chapter was already waiting. She thought about the letter on the nightstand. He hoped she would understand. She understood a great deal more than he had intended. She walked back to the hotel in the late afternoon with the particular kind of clarity that sometimes comes after a sustained shock. Not calm exactly, but clean. Stripped of the residue of hope that she had been carrying without realizing it. 12 years of small negotiations, of adjusting and accommodating and explaining herself. And underneath all of it, she had never stopped believing that the marriage was worth fighting for. She had never stopped trying to reach the version of Marcus she had married, the one who had seen her clearly. That version had either never fully existed or it had been replaced so gradually she had missed the transition. Either way, it was gone. In the elevator up to the 14th floor, a thought arrived clearly and without drama. She was not going to call Marcus. She was not going to ask him anything. She was not going to look for an explanation or seek reconciliation or beg for the return of anything he had taken from her. He had made a choice when he walked out of that room, and she was going to honor it absolutely and permanently. She was going to stay in Seoul, not because she had nowhere else to go, not because she was broken or defeated or paralyzed by what had been done to her, because Marcus had built something here, and she intended to understand it completely, and she was going to rebuild her own life in the middle of it, not to destroy him, but because this city was where she had been placed, and Amara Bennett had never left a situation without learning it first. She stepped out of the elevator and walked down the corridor to her room. She had 5 days of hotel, an embassy appointment in 2, a notepad full of information, and a mind that had been trained by necessity to work clearly under pressure. She sat at the desk and started writing again. By the time she finished, it was past midnight. The notepad was full. She turned off the light and lay in the bed that Marcus had left and stared at the ceiling in the dark. She did not cry. She had decided that she would do that later, on her own terms, in her own time, when the situation was different. Not suppressed, chosen. There was a difference, and she had always known where the line was. She closed her eyes. In the morning, she would begin. She woke up at 5:40 in the morning and lay there for exactly 30 seconds before she got up. Not because she had slept well. She had not slept well. She had moved in and out of something that felt more like controlled unconsciousness than rest. The kind of shallow sleep her body produced when it understood that shutting down completely was not an option. She was aware, even in the darkest part of the night, of the room around her. The hum of the air system, the strip of light under the door, the city noise rising 14 floors from the street below. But she got up at 5:40 because lying in bed past the point of usefulness was something she had never been able to do, even under ordinary circumstances, and these were not ordinary circumstances. She washed her face, brushed her teeth, made the instant coffee from the hotel's amenity basket because the room service menu required a credit card and she was conserving every coin of Korean won she had left. She stood at the window with the paper cup and watched Seoul emerge from darkness, the gradual brightening of the sky above the buildings, the thickening of traffic on the elevated road she could see from the corner of the window, the city pulling itself awake with the particular efficiency of a place that did not waste time on ceremony. She drank the coffee and thought about money. Specifically, she thought about the 1,100 won in her jacket pocket, which translated to just under $1, and the reality that the hotel reservation expired Friday, which was 3 days away, and her embassy appointment was Thursday afternoon, which meant the earliest she could receive emergency travel documentation was Friday morning, assuming the process moved without complications, which it might not. She had worked in compliance long enough to know that government processes rarely moved at the speed you needed them to. She needed income. The thought was clean and without self-pity. She needed money, and she needed it before Friday, and the only way to get it was to earn it, which meant she needed a job, which in Seoul, without a work visa and without speaking Korean and without a professional network of any kind, was going to require a specific kind of opportunity. She finished the coffee, set the cup on the windowsill, started getting dressed. She was going to find Park Jun-seo. The front desk manager was ending his overnight shift when she came downstairs at 6:15. She had timed it based on what she had observed the previous 2 mornings. He worked the overnight into early rotation, and he was always at the desk at this hour doing handover paperwork, which meant he was present but not actively managing a lobby full of guests. He looked up when she approached, and something in his expression shifted slightly. Not pity, exactly, but a particular kind of careful attention that told her he knew more about her situation than his professional neutrality had let on during their previous conversations. Hotel staff always knew. It was the nature of the work. "Ms. Bennett," he said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me," she said. She did not sit down. She stood at the desk at a normal conversational distance and kept her voice low. "The reservation on this room. When it was made, was there any kind of flag on the account? Any instruction about the second guest?" Park Jun-seo looked at her for a moment. He was in his late 20s, precise in the way of someone who had trained hard for a professional role and took it seriously. He made a small decision she could see him making. The reservation notes indicated that the secondary guest might require assistance with certain services, he said carefully. Specifically, that she might need help arranging transportation home. Amara absorbed that. He told you I might need help getting home. The notes came from the booking agency, which means he wrote them himself. Park Jun-seo did not confirm that. He did not deny it either. He looked at the counter between them. He planned the exit route for me, she said. Not to him. Just aloud, because saying it completed something in her understanding that had been almost complete since the library. Marcus had arranged everything. The hotel note was the final piece. A pre-written script for her humiliation, a stage direction that turned the hotel staff into unwitting participants in his production. She would be the confused, abandoned wife who needed help arranging transportation home, and the staff would facilitate her exit from Seoul cleanly and efficiently, and Marcus would never have to deal with the aftermath. She looked at Park Jun-seo. "I'm not going home," she said, "and I don't need transportation assistance. What I need is work. I need to earn money for the next 72 hours while I wait for emergency documentation from the embassy. I am a compliance professional with 11 years of financial sector experience, and I am also willing to do literally anything legal that this hotel needs done. I am organized, I am reliable, and I do not make problems." Park Jun-seo studied her. "What kind of anything?" he said. "Administrative, data entry, translation support if anything requires an English language interface, inventory, whatever you have." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I can't put you on the payroll without documentation." "I know. But there are things that fall outside the payroll process." "I understand." He looked at her for another long moment. "Come back at 9, he said. "I'll have spoken to the operations manager." She came back at 9. The operations manager, a compact woman in her 50s named Choi Seon-hee, looked her over with the brisk appraisal of someone who had spent decades managing human beings under pressure and could read the essentials of a situation in under 30 seconds. "Jun-seo says you're stuck," Choi Seon-hee said. Her English was efficient and direct. "Temporarily," Amara said. "You speak Korean?" "No." "Any Asian languages?" "No." "What can you actually do in this building that requires none of those things?" "Show me your English language guest complaint database, and I'll reorganize it into a reporting structure that tells you where your recurring service failures are occurring and which ones are costing you repeat bookings. I can do that in a day." Choi Seon-hee looked at her. "That's a specific offer." "I'm a specific person." The operations manager made a sound that was not quite a laugh. She looked at her watch. "I'll give you the database access today. If what you produce is useful, we'll discuss the next 2 days." It was not a salary, but it was a foothold. Amara sat down at a back-office workstation at 9:45 and started working. So she worked through lunch. She worked through the afternoon. She worked with the focused, slightly manic efficiency of someone who understood that competence was currently her only currency, and she could not afford to spend it carelessly. The database was a mess. Not badly maintained, just organized around the intuitions of whoever had built it, rather than around the questions it actually needed to answer. She restructured it into something clean, cross-referenced complaint categories against room numbers and staff shift patterns, and produced a summary that identified 3 specific recurring failure points that the hotel had been losing guests over without connecting the individual incidents into a systemic picture. Choi Seon-hee looked at the summary at 4:30 and was quiet for a moment. "How long have you worked in compliance?" she asked. 11 years. "Why did you stop?" Amara paused. "I didn't stop. I was redirected." The operations manager nodded once, in the manner of someone who understood exactly what that meant and had no interest in making it worse by pressing further. "Come back tomorrow," she said. "What?" Marcus called at 7 that evening. Amara was sitting in her hotel room eating convenience store ramen that she had bought with the small amount of cash Choi Seon-hee had given her for the day's work. Not much, but enough for food and enough for the subway fare she would need tomorrow. She looked at his name on her screen for 4 rings before she answered. "Amara." His voice was careful. Not apologetic, careful, which told her immediately that this call was not what it appeared to be. "Marcus, I wanted to make sure you were okay." She let that sit for a moment. "Why wouldn't I be okay?" A brief pause. "I know this was abrupt." "You took my passport." Another pause. Shorter. "I thought it would be better if you had a clear reason to contact the embassy, to start the process of—" "You took my passport," she said again. Same tone, same volume. "Amara, Don't. I'm trying to have a conversation with you. You're trying to find out where I am and whether I've done anything you need to manage, she said. Those are different things. The silence on his end lasted long enough that she could hear the ambient sound of wherever he was, indoor noise, voices in the background, the particular acoustic texture of a restaurant or hotel lobby. He was not alone. He had called her from somewhere social, which meant this conversation was, for him, a brief administrative task to be handled between other things. Are you at the hotel? He asked. There it was. Why? She said. I just want to know you're somewhere safe. I'm somewhere safe, she said. The room is paid through Friday. I know when it's paid through. I can arrange a flight for you. I can have it booked by tonight, departure whenever you want. She looked at her food cooling in the styrofoam cup. I don't need a flight. Silence. This one was different. She could feel the quality of it change through the phone, something tightening on his end. What does that mean? It means I don't need a flight. Amara, you don't have your passport. I'm aware of what I have and what I don't have. So how are you planning to... He stopped himself. She could almost hear him recalibrating. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted into the tone she knew best. The reasonable, patient, faintly concerned tone he used when he wanted her to feel like the irrational one. I'm just trying to help you get home safely. That's all this is. You told the hotel staff I might need help arranging transportation, she said. You wrote that in the booking notes before we even left the country. The silence that followed was the most honest thing he had given her in years. You planned every part of this, she said. The hotel, the timing, the passport, the account. You didn't make an impulsive decision. You built this. Amara, How long? She said. Not what you told yourself, the answer was. Actually, how long? He didn't answer. I found the subsidiary, she said. The Korean registration, 18 months ago. She heard his breathing change, a small thing. Most people would have missed it. She had spent 12 years learning to read Marcus through the things he did not say, and the breath shift was significant. I don't know what you think you found, he said. His voice was flat now. The reasonable tone was gone. I think I found the reason you chose Seoul, she said. Of all the places you could have brought me. You need to be careful, he said. About what? About making accusations you don't understand the implications of. She looked at the wall across from the bed. Was that a threat? It's advice. For my husband who removed my identification from my bag while I was sleeping in a foreign country. From someone who knows how certain situations can go badly for people who insert themselves where they don't belong. She felt her chest tighten. Not fear, something harder than fear. I haven't inserted myself anywhere. You brought me here. And I'm offering you a clean exit. Take it. I'm not taking it. The call ended. She sat with the phone in her hand for a moment. Then she set it face down on the nightstand and picked up the styrofoam cup and ate the rest of the ramen because she was hungry and because she was not going to let Marcus Bennett ruin her dinner on top of everything else. The next morning, she went back to the hotel's back office and worked through the second database project Choi Seon-hee had left for her. Around 11, Park Jun-seo appeared in the doorway. Someone came by this morning asking about you, he said. She looked up from the screen. What kind of someone? A man, Korean, well-dressed. He paused. He asked if we had a guest named Amara Bennett and when her reservation ended. Her hands went still on the keyboard. What did you tell him? I told him we don't discuss guest information. She looked at him. Thank you. He left a card. Park Jun-seo held it out. It was plain. No company name, just a phone number and 2 Korean characters she could not read. She held the card without looking away from Park Jun-seo. Do you know what these characters mean? He glanced at the card. Something shifted in his face. A barely perceptible change, a slight compression of his expression that told her the answer was significant before he said it. It's a name, he said. Kong. The way he said it, flat, careful, with a particular quality of stillness, told her everything about the weight of that name in this city. She looked at the card again. Did he say anything else? He said you looked like someone who could use a conversation with the right person. Park Jun-seo paused. His words. She turned the card over. Nothing on the back. She had been in Seoul for 4 days. She had no connections, no network, no history here. The only person who had any particular reason to know she existed and to seek her out was Marcus. And this man was not acting on Marcus's behalf, because Marcus was trying to move her out of the city, not deeper into it, which meant someone else had noticed her. She put the card in her jacket pocket and went back to work. That evening, walking back toward the hotel in the early dark, she stopped at a crosswalk and took the card out and looked at it again under the streetlight. She had worked in financial compliance for 11 years. She knew what certain names meant in certain cities. She knew the architecture of legitimate power and the way it overlapped with the other kind. She knew that a man who sent a well-dressed representative to ask after a foreign woman in a hotel and left only a name was a man who was not uncertain about his own significance. The question was why. She put the card back in her pocket and crossed the street. She was going to find out. She called the number the following morning from the back office, on her own phone, with the door closed. It rang twice. "Ms. Bennett." The voice that answered was low, measured, and spoke English with a precision that suggested it was not the speaker's first language but had been learned thoroughly. "I was expecting your call. You were expecting it yesterday," she said. "You're careful. That's not a criticism." "Who are you?" "You already know my name." "I know a name on a card. I don't know who you are." A pause. When he spoke again, there was something in his voice that she could not entirely categorize. Not amusement exactly, but an awareness of something happening that he found interesting. "I know your husband, not personally, by reputation and by certain business interests that have come to my attention. I also know that he left you in a hotel in my city without a passport, and that you have been handling that situation with a competence that most people in your position would not have. You've been watching me. This is my city. I notice things that happen in it. Why would a woman stranded in a hotel be something you noticed? Because you are not behaving like a stranded woman. You are behaving like someone conducting an assessment. That is an unusual quality." She said nothing. "I would like to meet," he said. "In a public place, at a time of your choosing. I have information about your husband's business activities that I believe you will find useful. In exchange, I have a question I would like to ask you." "What question?" "I'll ask it when we meet." She looked at the wall. She thought about the threat in Marcus's voice on the phone 2 nights ago. She thought about the Korean subsidiary, 18 months old, registered under a name that wasn't his. She thought about a man who had spent 12 years learning her patterns and had used every one of them against her. "Tomorrow," she said, 7 in the evening, somewhere with enough people that neither of us is making a private decision." "I know a place," he said. "I'll send the address." The call ended. She sat with the phone in her lap and her hands flat on her knees, and she breathed. She had just agreed to meet a man whose name made a competent hotel manager go still and flat-voiced. She did not know exactly what kind of man he was, though she could make an educated guess. She did not know what he wanted from her, though she could narrow the possibilities. What she did know was this. Marcus had put her in this city deliberately, had taken her resources deliberately, and had threatened her when she did not behave the way he expected. He had moved her like a piece on a board. She was done being moved. If Kang, whoever and whatever Kong was, had information about Marcus's business, she was going to hear it. She was going to hear it, and she was going to understand it, and she was going to decide with full information and clear eyes what to do with it. That was the only thing left to decide. The address came through 20 minutes later. A private members club in the Gangnam district. She looked it up on the hotel computer and found almost nothing. A minimal web presence, a street address, and a single brief mention in a business publication describing it as a venue for Seoul's financial and executive community. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked at her reflection in the dark screen when the computer went to sleep. She had 3 days left on her hotel reservation. Her embassy appointment was tomorrow afternoon. Emergency documentation was possible by Friday. And on Friday morning, she had a meeting with a man named Kang in a private club in Gangnam. Marcus had thought bringing her to Seoul would end her. Instead, without intending to, he had put her in the same city as someone who appeared to have specific and detailed reasons to be interested in what Marcus was doing here. She did not know yet whether that was going to help her or destroy her. But she was not going home to find out from a safe distance. She closed the computer, picked up her jacket, and walked back out into the city that Marcus had chosen as the place where she would fall apart. The city that was, day by day and choice by choice, beginning to feel like the place where she was going to put herself back together instead. She spent Thursday morning at the embassy. The waiting room had the specific quality of desperation compressed into institutional beige, plastic chairs bolted to the floor, a number system, fluorescent light that made everyone look slightly unwell. She took a number and sat and watched the other Americans in the room with the detached attention she gave to everything now. A college-aged kid who had lost his wallet, a family whose luggage had been stolen at the airport, an older man who kept checking his phone and then looking at the ceiling. All of them had the same expression, the particular look of someone who understood, for the first time in a concrete and physical way, how much of their sense of security had been built on a document. She understood it now too, differently than she had 48 hours ago. Her appointment was at 2 in the afternoon. The officer who saw her was a woman in her late 30s named Carson, whose lanyard held 3 separate badge clips, and who had the permanently efficient manner of someone processing an enormous volume of human crisis on a daily basis. She reviewed Amara's information, confirmed the police report Amara had filed the previous day about the missing passport, and explained the emergency documentation process in clear, practiced language. Processing time is typically 48 to 72 hours, Carson said. Given the circumstances you've described, we can flag it for expedited review, but I can't guarantee the timeline. I understand, Amara said. Do you have a place to stay while you wait? Until Friday morning, Carson looked at her. And after that? I'm working on it. It was the kind of answer that Carson had heard many times before in many forms. She wrote something on the form in front of her, then looked up. There are emergency resources available through the embassy for citizens in genuine hardship situations. It's not a large amount, but it's something. Do you want me to flag your case? Amara thought about Marcus sitting in a restaurant somewhere in this city, making a phone call to her that lasted 4 minutes while other people's conversations moved around him. Yes, she said, please flag it. She left the embassy at 3:15 with a receipt, a case number, and the knowledge that her emergency documentation would be ready no earlier than Saturday morning and possibly as late of Monday. She stood on the pavement outside and did the math that she had been doing continuously for 5 days. Hotel expired Friday. Documentation available Saturday at earliest. She needed one more night somewhere. She took out her phone and called Park Jun-seo. He answered on the second ring, which told her he had been expecting the call. The reservation ends tomorrow, she said. I know. Is there anything available at the hotel for Saturday? Anything at all. Any room category. A pause. There's a single room on the 6th floor. It's not normally bookable. It's a staff adjacency room, used for overflow. It's not on the public system. What would it cost? He told her a number that was low enough that she understood it was not the real number. She was quiet for a moment. Jun-seo. The operations manager approved it, he said, in the tone of someone closing a topic. She closed her eyes briefly. Tell Choi Seon-hee I'll have the additional database work done by end of day Friday. She'll appreciate that. She ended the call and stood on the pavement with her phone in her hand and the afternoon Seoul traffic moving past her, and she felt something she had been carefully not feeling for 5 days. The specific and acute gratitude of someone who has been helped by strangers when the people who were supposed to care had not. She did not have time to sit with it. She put the phone in her pocket and walked toward the subway. She had a meeting in 4 hours. The private club was on a street in Gangnam that looked from the outside like nothing in particular, a building face of dark stone, a single door with no signage. A man in a dark suit standing slightly to the left of the entrance who looked at her when she approached, and then looked away and opened the door without asking for identification. Inside, it was quiet in the way that expensive places are quiet, a managed quiet, produced by deliberate acoustic choices and a careful ratio of people to space. Low lighting, dark wood. A bar along one wall staffed by 2 people moving with the particular economy of motion that came from years of training. Perhaps 30 people in the room, distributed across tables and along a seating area near the windows that looked out onto a garden that was lit from below. She was early. She had intended to be early. She sat at the bar and ordered water and looked at the room in the glass behind the bar, the reflection giving her the whole space at once, the way her mother had taught her to read a room when she was 7 years old. Know where everyone is before you let anyone know where you are. She heard him before she saw him. Not his voice, a change in the room's quality, a slight adjustment in the posture of the staff. The man nearest the door straightening fractionally, the bartender's hands momentarily stilling. Then he was at the bar beside her. Kang Ji-ho was not what she had constructed in her mind over the previous 24 hours, and yet he was exactly what she should have expected. I was perhaps 45, lean in the manner of someone who had never in his adult life been comfortable enough to be otherwise, with a face that was not handsome in any conventional sense but was deeply readable once you knew what to look for, a face that had been through things and had not softened afterward. He wore a dark suit with no tie, and he sat down at the bar beside her with the ease of a man who had never in his life had to negotiate for the space he occupied. "Ms. Bennett," he said, "you look like someone who didn't sleep." "I slept enough," she said. "That's different from sleeping well. Most things that keep me functioning are different from their ideal versions right now." Something moved across his face. Not a smile exactly, a recognition. He ordered tea. When it came, he wrapped both hands around the cup in a way that was unexpectedly unguarded, not a performance of ease, but an actual one, and looked at the garden through the window. "You said you had information about my husband's business," she said. "I do." "Then let's not waste each other's time." He looked at her. "All right." He turned the cup slightly on its saucer. "Your husband's Korean subsidiary was registered 18 months ago as a holding vehicle for a real estate development project in the Mapo district. The listed director is a man named Oh Dae-jung, who is a retired accountant with no development experience and no personal capital. He is what we call a name holder. A front. Correct. The actual operating funds came through a series of transfers from your husband's U.S. company. The transfers were structured in a specific way, amounts just below the reporting threshold, timed at irregular intervals, routed through 2 intermediate accounts before reaching the Korean entity. Amara looked at him. "That's money laundering structuring." "That is one name for it." "You said one name. What's another?" "In the context of what I know about the Mapo project's actual purpose, I would call it investment concealment." She was quiet for a moment. Her hands were flat on the bar in front of her. "What is the actual purpose of the Mapo project?" Kang Ji-ho looked at her steadily. "Before I answer that, I want to ask you the question I mentioned." She waited. "How much did you know?" he said. The question landed differently than she expected. Not accusatory, genuinely curious, with an undertone of something she couldn't immediately name. Not sympathy, something more functional than that. An assessment. About the Korean subsidiary? About your husband's business practices, in general. She thought about the 11 years of compliance work, the patterns she had recognized in the way Marcus organized his financial entities, the things she had noticed and set aside because noticing them fully would have required her to dismantle a set of beliefs she was not ready to dismantle. "I knew enough that I should have looked harder," she said. "I didn't look harder because I trusted him." Kang Ji-ho nodded once. No judgment in it. "The Mapo project," she said. "Tell me." He told her. It took 11 minutes. She knew because she was aware of the time in the way she was aware of everything in the room. Not compulsively, just precisely, the clock on the wall in her peripheral vision. He spoke in a low, even voice that did not dramatize anything. He told her about the development project, which was real, and the investment partners behind it, some of whom were people whose money needed to move through legitimate-appearing vehicles. He told her about Oh Dae-jung's actual role, which was not just name-holding, but active coordination. He told her about Marcus's U.S. company's exposure, the pattern of transfers, the timeline, the amounts, and what a forensic financial review would find. And then he told her about the woman. Her name was Shin Yuri. She was 34 years old. She had been the Korean subsidiary's operational manager for 14 months. She had met Marcus 8 months before that, at a conference in Chicago. He showed her a photograph on his phone, placed it on the bar in front of her and said nothing. Amara looked at it. Marcus and a woman she had never seen, at a table in what appeared to be a restaurant, leaning toward each other in the particular way that people lean toward each other when the conversation was private. The timestamp on the photograph was 14 months ago. She looked at the photograph for a long time. This was not the part that broke her. She had already known about the woman in some form. the accumulating distance, the phone always face down, the emotional texture of the marriage in its last 2 years. She had not known her name or her face, but she had known the shape of her existence. What broke her, quietly, in the space behind her sternum, was the timeline. 14 months ago. The Korean subsidiary had been registered 18 months ago. Marcus had built his Korean operation, met Shin Yuri, installed her as the operational manager, and brought Amara to Seoul, the city where his new life was headquartered, where this woman existed, where his financial structure was rooted. And he had brought Amara here not just to leave her, but because he needed her here. Why did he need me in Seoul specifically? She said. Her voice was flat. Not a question. Working it out. Kang Ji-ho waited. The joint financial accounts, she said. We still had joint accounts, some of the asset structure from the early years of the marriage. She stopped. He needed my signature on something, or he needed me to be physically present and then absent to establish. She stopped again. She picked up her glass of water and held it without drinking. He was going to claim you had jointly agreed to the asset restructuring, Kang Ji-ho said. There are documents registered with a Korean legal firm in the Seoul district that bear your signature. She set the glass down. I have never signed any document connected to anything in South Korea, she said. I know. He forged my signature. Or had it forged. She sat very still. Forged documents. Joint accounts. An abandoned wife who could be located, contacted, established as a voluntary participant, and then dismissed. Her subsequent distress attributable to a marriage breakdown. Her departure from the country clean and verifiable. Her signature on file for whatever legal purpose it served. He had brought her here to use her presence as cover, and then to use her departure as insulation. She had not just been abandoned, she had been deployed. The room continued around her. The low conversations, the movement of staff, the garden lit from below through the window. Everything exactly as it had been 60 seconds ago. She was aware of Kang Ji-ho beside her, not touching her, not speaking, simply present in the way of someone who understood that certain information needed to be absorbed at its own pace. How do you know all of this? She said. Because the investment partners in the MAPO project moved money through structures that intersect with businesses. I have an interest in monitoring. When Oh Dae-jung's name appeared as the registered director, I had him looked into. When I found your husband's company behind the transfers, I had him looked into. When I found his hotel reservation for 2 guests, and then found one guest sitting alone in the back office of my associate's hotel doing compliance analysis, I became curious. She turned to look at him directly. Your associate's hotel. Choi Seon-hee has worked for me for 9 years. She absorbed that. So you've been watching me since I arrived. I became aware of you 4 days ago. There's a difference. Is there? Yes, I did not arrange for you to be given work. Choi Seon-hee made that decision independently, as she makes most decisions. I simply... He paused. Paid attention to what she told me. Amara looked at the bar in front of her, the wood grain, the reflection of the room's lights in the polished surface. She was trying to find the edge of something, the place where the information stopped making sense and became something she needed to reject, and she could not find it. Everything Kang Ji-ho had told her tonight fit inside the pattern she had been assembling since the morning she woke up alone in the 14th floor room. It fit too well. Completed the shape of what Marcus had done in a way that was coherent and appalling. The documents, she said. The ones with my forged signature. What are they for? They appear to be consent documents for the asset transfer of jointly held property from a U.S. entity to the Korean subsidiary. If your husband were to be investigated for the financial structuring, those documents would suggest you had knowledge of and agreed to the transactions. She turned to look at him again. He was building me as his insurance policy. Kang Ji-ho said nothing. If his Korean operation came under scrutiny, he could produce documents showing his wife had agreed to the transfers, which would distribute the legal exposure. She paused. And I would be in another country with no knowledge of any of it, which would either make me look complicit or incompetent, and either way, she was the problem, and he walked free. She picked up the water glass and drank from it, because her throat had gone very dry. She called Marcus from outside the club at 9:47 in the evening, standing on the dark stone pavement, with the city moving around her and her heartbeat in her ears. and the particular feeling of someone who has just had the floor of a room they have been standing in for years give way beneath them. He answered on the third ring. I want to talk about the documents in Seocho, she said. 3 seconds of silence that told her everything. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. Marcus. I don't know what you're talking about, and I don't know who you've been talking to, but I need you to stop whatever you think you're doing and go back to your room. You forged my signature on legal documents in a Korean firm. That is an insane accusation. It is a specific and accurate description of something you did. Amara listened to me very carefully. His voice had shifted completely. The reasonable tone was gone. The careful tone was gone. What was underneath was something she had never quite heard before. Not anger, which she would have known how to read, but a cold precision that told her she was no longer talking to the man who had managed her perceptions for 12 years. She was talking to whoever was underneath that management. You are in a foreign country without documentation. You have no money, no network, no legal standing. You have been talking to people you do not understand, in a world you do not understand, and you are going to get hurt. That is not a threat. That is information. How is that different from a threat? A threat implies I'm the danger. I'm not the danger. The people you're apparently making friends with are the danger, and they are using you. And when they're done using you, they will drop you somewhere significantly worse than a nice hotel in Gangnam. Then why did you bring me here, she said. If Seoul is so dangerous, why did you bring me here and leave me here? He didn't answer. You brought me here because you needed me here, she said. And you need me to leave now because whatever purpose I served, I've served it, and now I'm an unpredictable variable. You are making a very serious mistake. I already know that, she said. I made it 12 years ago. I'm not making another one tonight. She ended the call. Her hands were not shaking. She noticed that. They were cold. The night air had a bite to it that she hadn't expected, but they were steady. She turned around. Kang Ji-ho was standing outside the club door, not close enough to have heard the call, far enough away that his presence was not pressure, but was unmistakably there. He looked at her the way he had looked at her all evening, with the specific quality of someone who was paying genuine attention rather than performing it. He threatened you, Ji-ho said. He called it information. That's how men like your husband deliver threats. They wrap them in concern. She looked at him. What do you want from me? Actually, not the version where you're doing me a favor. He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, it was without the careful pacing of the evening's earlier conversation. Your husband's financial structure in the Mapo project intersects with money that I have an interest in cleaning. He has used my city to build something that functions in a space I consider mine. I want to understand the full shape of what he's built, and you understand his organizational patterns better than anyone else. You want me to help you dismantle his operation. I want you to understand what he built, and tell me if I have missed anything. And in exchange, I will make sure the documents bearing your forged signature are known to the appropriate Korean authorities before your husband can use them. She looked at the street. A taxi moved past. A couple walking a dog. The ordinary texture of a city at 10 o'clock on a Thursday night, completely indifferent to the specific catastrophe unfolding in its midst. If I help you, she said, I become part of this, whatever this is. You are already part of it. Your name is on documents in a firm in Seocho. You are already in this city. You are already in this conversation. Marcus said the people I'm talking to will drop me somewhere worse than a hotel. Your husband is a man who forged your signature on financial documents while planning to leave you in a foreign country without identification. I would consider the source of that warning. She almost laughed. Not from humor. From the specific absurdity of standing on a Gangnam pavement at 10 o'clock at night, weighing the warnings of her forger husband against the counsel of a man whose name made hotel managers go carefully still. She looked at Kang Ji-ho. I need to know one thing, she said. Ask. The woman, Shin Yuri, is she aware of what Marcus did with my name? A pause. Something moved in Ji-ho's face, something careful. That, he said, is a more complicated answer than yes or no. She felt the cold pavement through the soles of her shoes. She felt the night air. She felt the particular quality of a moment when the last version of something you had been carrying finally and completely stops being what you thought it was. Tell me the complicated answer, she said. And that was the moment. Standing on a street in Seoul at 10:14 on a Thursday night, 5 days after waking up alone in a hotel room with an empty bed and an envelope on the nightstand, that Amara Bennett understood she was not going to be the same person on the other side of this. Whatever she decided in the next 60 seconds was going to change the fundamental shape of her life. She waited for him to speak. Shin Yuri knew about the documents, Jiho said. She notarized 2 of them. The pavement held her weight. That was the only thing she was certain of for the next 4 seconds, that the ground was still under her feet and she was still standing on it. She's a notary, Amara said. She holds a Korean legal certification, yes, among other things. She notarized documents bearing my forged signature. 2 of the 4. The other 2 were handled by a junior associate at the Seoul firm who may or may not have understood what he was processing. Amara turned away from him and looked at the street. A bus moved past. Its windows threw light across the pavement in a brief sliding rectangle, and then it was gone. Shin Yuri had not just been the woman Marcus was building a life with. She had been an active participant in the legal architecture designed to use Amara as a liability shield. She had held the pen, not Marcus's pen, her own certification, her own professional seal, and pressed it to documents that put Amara's name on transactions Amara had never agreed to. How old is she? Amara said. 34. 8 years younger. That landed somewhere specific, and she acknowledged it and kept moving. Does she know he left me in the hotel? I believe that was her suggestion, Jiho said. The cold moved through her differently after that. Not the temperature. Something internal. A shift in the particular quality of what she was feeling, which had been, until this moment, primarily anger at Marcus, the kind of anger that comes from betrayal by someone you trusted. What replaced it was colder and more precise and more dangerous. Not anger at a woman she did not know, something more functional. The recognition that she had been surrounded and that the encirclement had been deliberate and that waiting was no longer a viable position. She turned back to Jiho. When does Marcus need those documents to be clean? She said. What's the timeline on the Mapo project? Something sharpened in his face. You understand how this works. I spent 11 years auditing financial structures. Tell me the timeline. The project's first phase closes in 19 days. The asset transfer needs to be legally settled before that date for the partnership structure to hold. So he has 19 days to keep those documents unchallenged. 18 now. She did the math. And if I contest them? If I go to the Korean legal authorities and state formally that my signature was forged? Then the documents are frozen pending investigation. The first phase cannot close. The partnership begins to ask questions Marcus cannot answer. And the financial structuring exposure, the transfers below reporting threshold, becomes visible to exactly the kind of scrutiny your husband cannot afford. His entire Korean operation collapses. Over a period of weeks, yes. These things move at legal speed, and Shin Yuri's certification is on the documents. On 2 of them. Her license would be subject to review. Yes. Amara breathed. In through her nose, out through her mouth, one long, deliberate cycle that she used when she needed to think without the thinking showing on her face. I need a lawyer, she said. Korean. Someone who handles financial fraud and document authentication. I know someone. Independent of you. He paused. That's a reasonable condition. I also need the documents themselves, copies. Before I walk into any legal office, I need to know exactly what I'm contesting. I can have copies to you by morning. And I need... She stopped, pressed her lips together. This was the part that cost something. I need somewhere to stay after Friday. The hotel expires and my documentation isn't ready until Saturday at earliest. He looked at her for a moment. There is a guest apartment above this club. It's used for members who need discretion. You would have your own key. Staff would not discuss your presence. I pay for it. When you're able. That's not what I said. I know what you said. He held her gaze. Consider it a deferred arrangement. She looked at him for a long time, reading him the way she read every room, not for what was performed, but for what was underneath the performance. What she found was not warmth, exactly, not altruism, something more complicated and more honest than either, the recognition of a particular quality in her that he found useful, combined with something she could not entirely categorize that felt less like strategy and more like respect. She was not naive about what kind of man he was. She was not naive about what his world cost the people who lived in it. But she was also standing on a pavement in Seoul with forged documents bearing her name in a firm she had never visited, and the man in front of her was the only person who had told her the truth since she arrived. "I'll see the apartment," she said. She did not sleep that night. Not because the apartment was bad. It was small and clean and had a window that looked over the lit garden and a desk that was exactly the right height. But because the information she was carrying refused to settle into something she could rest alongside. She sat at the desk with her notepad and wrote out everything Jiho had told her in the precise, systematic format she had used for 11 years in compliance audits. Not how she felt it, not what it meant for her marriage or her life, or her understanding of the person she had been for the last decade, but what it was. The structure, the timeline, the documents, the people, the exposure. When she finished, it was 3 in the morning, and she had 6 pages of notes and a clear, cold picture of what Marcus had built and where its weakest points were. She looked at the 6 pages. Then she thought about Shin Yuri pressing her professional seal to a document with Amara's forged signature. She closed the notepad. She needed to sleep. She needed to be functional. She would feel the full weight of this later, on her own time, in her own space. She lay down on the bed with her clothes on and closed her eyes. The copies of the documents arrived at 7:15 in the morning, delivered by a young man in a plain jacket who handed her a sealed envelope without making eye contact and left. She opened the envelope at the desk with coffee that the club's downstairs staff had left outside her door. She had heard the knock, waited until the footsteps receded, then retrieved the tray because she was not yet ready to interact with anyone. She spread the documents across the desk. 4 of them. Dense legal Korean with English translations attached. Professional translations, she noted, not machine-generated. Someone had paid for these to be done properly. She read through all 4 translations carefully, twice. Her name appeared 11 times across the 4 documents. Her signature appeared at the bottom of each one, and she looked at those signatures for a long time. They were good. They were not perfect. There was a slight difference in the loop of the capital A that someone who knew her handwriting well would catch, but they were good enough to pass a casual review by someone who had no particular reason to scrutinize them. Marcus had always paid attention to details. She took photographs of every page with her phone. Then she made a written list of every specific element that was fraudulent, with the page number and the relevant clause. Then she looked at the clock. It was 7:50. She had things to do before she could do the things that mattered. Choi Seon-hee was in the hotel's back office when Amara arrived at 8:30 to retrieve the personal items she had left at the workstation. The operations manager looked at her with the same brisk appraisal she applied to everything, and then did something she had not done in any of their previous interactions. She said, "Are you all right?" Amara looked at her. "You know who Jiho is to me now. I know what he told you." "Did you know before? About the documents?" Choi Seon-hee was quiet for a moment. "I knew your husband had an interest in Seoul that was not limited to your marriage. I didn't know the specifics until Jiho told me 2 days ago. But you helped me anyway. I helped you because you sat down at a database and fixed in 1 day something that had been broken for 3 years and didn't ask for anything except a chance to be useful." She paused. "That's worth helping." Amara picked up her bag. "Thank you," she said, "for the work, for Junseo, for not sending me home when you could have." Choi Seon-hee made the sound that was not quite a laugh. "Don't thank me yet. You haven't finished whatever you're in the middle of." Marcus called at 9:17. She was on the subway, heading toward the Seocho district to meet the lawyer Jiho had identified, a woman named Lee Bo-young, who specialized in financial fraud and document authentication and who had agreed to a consultation at 10. Amara looked at Marcus's name on her screen and felt her jaw tighten and answered. "Where are you staying?" he said. No greeting. "Why?" "Because you checked out of the hotel this morning and I need to know where you are." The fact that he knew she had checked out told her the hotel reservation had been connected to some form of notification on his end, which meant he had been monitoring it, which meant the hotel note about the transportation arrangement had not been the only embedded surveillance in his planning. "You had a flag on the room," she said. "Checkout notification." Silence. "What else did you have on me, Marcus?" "Amar, the phone? Did you do something to the phone before we left? This is not... Answer the question. I'm trying to talk to you like an adult. You forged my signature on legal documents in a country I had never visited, she said. Her voice was low and even, and she was aware of the other passengers in the subway car, and she did not care. You brought me to the city where you have been building a second life for 18 months. You took my identification while I was asleep, and now you want to know where I'm sleeping so you can... What, Marcus? What exactly is the plan at this point? The plan, he said, and his voice had the cold precision she had heard 2 nights ago, is for you to get on a plane and go home before you do something that creates a problem for both of us. Both of us, she repeated. Your name is on documents in this country. If those documents come under investigation, you are not insulated just because you didn't sign them. You will be questioned. Your financial history will be reviewed. Your professional background and compliance will make you look more culpable, not less. She felt her stomach drop. Not because it was true. It wasn't, and she knew it, but because it was exactly the right shape of threat to use against her. He knew her. He knew that the 11 years of compliance work meant she understood what a financial fraud investigation looked like from the inside, and he knew that the knowledge would make the threat feel more concrete than it was. My name is on documents I didn't sign, she said. Prove it. The subway car slid into a station. People moved around her. I'm going to, she said. That's exactly what I'm going to do. She heard his breath change. Do not go to a Korean lawyer with this. I have an appointment at 10. Amara. The cold precision cracked, just slightly, just enough. You do not understand what you are getting into. I'm getting into the thing you put me into, she said. I didn't choose any of this. You chose it, every piece of it. So stop calling it a problem I'm creating and own what you actually did. The people behind the Mapo project are your problem, she said. Not mine. She ended the call. Her hands were shaking. She noticed it this time. The fine, high-frequency tremor in her fingers, the kind that comes not from fear, but from adrenaline that has nowhere to go. She pressed her palms flat against her thighs and breathed and watched the subway station slide past. At Seoul, she got off and walked 3 blocks to the address Jiho had given her. Lee Bo-young was 51 years old, small, and had the particular economy of movement and speech that Amara associated with people who had spent decades doing consequential work in high-pressure environments. Her office was clean and functional, with no decorative elements except a single painting on the wall behind her desk that Amara did not have time to look at properly. She reviewed the document copies and the photographs for 12 minutes without speaking. Amara sat across from her and waited. The signature variations here, Lee Bo-young said, not looking up, tapping 2 places on separate documents. You identified these yourself? Yes. What's your professional background? Financial compliance. 11 years. Lee Bo-young looked up. These are well-constructed forgeries. The variation you found is subtle. Most examiners wouldn't catch it on a routine review. I know my own handwriting. That's actually the best evidence. A declaratory statement from the purported signatory, combined with a forensic handwriting analysis and the notarial irregularities. She paused. There are notarial irregularities. The seal on document 2 is applied at a pressure and angle inconsistent with standard Korean notarial procedure. It looks like it was pressed by someone unfamiliar with the specific stamp. Amara stared at her. She made a mistake. Someone did. Lee Bo-young set the papers down and folded her hands. Filing a formal contestation of these documents initiates an investigation into the authentication process. The Seoul firm will be required to produce their client file. The notary whose certification appears on documents 2 and 3 will be interviewed by the Korean bar. And the documents are frozen during investigation, immediately upon filing. How long does filing take? If I prepare the application today, it can be submitted tomorrow morning. A judge will issue the freeze order within 24 hours of submission. Amara looked at her hands. 19 days until the Mapo project phase closure. If the documents were frozen by tomorrow afternoon, Marcus had 18 days and no legal foundation to stand on. The partnership would ask questions. The financial structuring would be visible. Oh Da-jung's name-holding role would unravel. Everything he had spent 18 months building would begin coming apart in the most public and legally consequential way possible. There's a risk, Lee Bo-young said. You understand that. Tell me. The people behind the MAPO project are not individuals who respond to legal interference passively. Filing this contestation makes you a visible opponent of their financial interests. You are a foreign national without documentation currently in Seoul. That combination requires careful management. What kind of careful management? I would advise you not to be alone in any location Marcus Bennett knows about. I would advise you to ensure that someone with enough presence in this city to constitute a deterrent is aware of your situation. Amara thought about a man whose name made hotel managers go still and flat-voiced. I have someone, she said. Lee Bo-young looked at her for a moment. Then she opened a drawer and took out a legal pad. Then let's begin. She left Lee Bo-young's office at 12:40. She stood on the Seoul pavement and texted Ji-ho, filing tomorrow morning. Documents frozen by tomorrow evening. His response came in 40 seconds. Understood. Don't go anywhere Marcus knows about tonight. She was already not going anywhere Marcus knew about. She texted back. Done. Then she put her phone in her pocket and looked at the street. She had been in Seoul for 6 days. She had arrived as a wife on a romantic trip designed to destroy her. She was leaving Seoul as the primary contestant in a legal filing that was going to set fire to 18 months of careful criminal construction. She started walking toward the subway. She had covered half a block when she saw him. Marcus was standing 20 meters ahead of her on the pavement, and he had not seen her yet. He was looking at his phone, his face angled down, dressed in the charcoal jacket she had bought him 2 Christmases ago, and for one disorienting second she looked at him and felt the 12 years like a physical weight in her chest. Not love. Something heavier and more complicated. The specific grief of recognizing a person you had structured your life around and understanding that the structure was built on a surface that was never solid. Then he looked up. They looked at each other across 20 meters of Seoul pavement. His face did something she had not seen it do before. Not anger. Not the cold precision. Something that looked, for just a moment, like the expression of a man who had not expected to be found doing what he was doing and had not prepared a face for this specific situation. She did not stop walking. She walked directly toward him at the same pace she had been walking, unhurried, her bag over her shoulder, her eyes on his face, and she watched him recalibrate in real time, watched him pull something together, watched his posture shift, watched him decide what this was going to be. She stopped 2 meters from him. You followed me, she said. I needed to talk to you. You followed me to a lawyer's office, Marcus. I need you to not file anything. His voice was different again, not cold, urgent. She had not heard urgency from him in years, and it reorganized his face into something younger and worse. Amara, I need you to hear me. The people behind this project, if you file a contestation and the documents are frozen, they will not come after me. They will come after the visible disruption, and right now you are the visible disruption. She looked at him. You're telling me that in order to protect myself from the people you got into business with, I should allow documents bearing my forged signature to stand. I'm telling you that there are people in this who will, you forged my name, Marcus. I know. Say that again. His jaw tightened. I know what I did. Why did you do it? Because I needed the structure to work, and I needed a secondary signature for the consent filings, and He stopped, looked at the street, looked back at her. It was the only way to make it clean. You used me. I know. You brought me to this city to use my presence and then dispose of me cleanly. Her voice did not shake. She had not known until this moment whether it would or not, and now she knew. And now you're standing in front of me telling me I should let that stand because the people you're in business with are dangerous. I'm trying to protect you. You have never once protected me, she said. Not in 12 years. Everything you ever did that looked like protection was protecting the version of me that was useful to you. That's not... I filed a statement with the embassy this morning documenting the theft of my passport, she said. It was not entirely true. She had filed a police report on day 2 and updated it, but she wanted him to hear it as a present tense action, which it functionally was. The contestation application goes in tomorrow morning. If you want to spend the next 18 days having a conversation with your business partners about why their financial structure is collapsing, you are welcome to do that, but you are not going to do it with my name. Marcus grabbed her arm. Not hard, not violent. But his hand closed around her forearm above the wrist, and the contact was so unexpected after everything. After 6 days of waking alone and working in back offices and reading forged documents at desks in borrowed rooms, that she felt her body react before her mind did. Her arm went rigid. Her other hand came up. "Let go," she said. "You're going to get hurt." His voice was low, and his grip did not tighten, but it did not loosen either. "Amara, listen to me. I know what I did was wrong. I know all of it was wrong. But you walking into that world is going to get you hurt in ways that I won't be able to fix." She looked at his hand on her arm. "You don't get to be worried about me now. I'm not worried about you now. I have been worried about you since the moment you didn't get on that plane. You were worried about what I might find. Both. It can be both." His face was doing the thing it had done across the pavement, the unguarded thing, the thing she had not seen in years, the version of Marcus that existed underneath the performance. "I made choices that I cannot undo. I understand that. But what you are about to do is not recovery. It's a war you didn't start and don't understand the edges of, and I'm asking you. His voice broke on the second asking, slightly, just enough that she felt it in her chest despite everything. "Please, come home." She looked at him for a long moment. 12 years. The man who had seen her clearly, or had appeared to. The man who had notarized the distance between who she thought they were and who he had actually been all along. The man whose jacket she had bought, whose patterns she knew by heart, whose absence from a cold hotel bed had been the first sound of an alarm she should have heard years earlier. She reached up and removed his hand from her arm. Not roughly, deliberately, finger by finger. "I am home," she said. "This is where you put me." She walked past him. She heard him say her name once, behind her, just her name. The way he had said it in the beginning, when it still meant something uncomplicated. She kept walking. She made it to the end of the block before her legs went wrong. Not failing, just suddenly less reliable, the adrenaline dropping all at once in a way that physics demanded. She stopped at the corner and put one hand on the building face beside her and breathed. A woman passed her and glanced at her and kept moving. The city moved around her, indifferent, relentless. 10 million people with 10 million things more important than whatever was happening at this corner. She breathed. She thought about the 12 years and she let herself feel the full weight of them for exactly 45 seconds. The waste of it, the specific loneliness of having been loved imperfectly and dishonestly by someone she had trusted completely, the grief that did not feel like grief, but felt like the specific ache of something that had been load-bearing for a long time, finally being removed. 45 seconds. Then she straightened up, took her hand off the wall, fixed her bag on her shoulder. She took out her phone and called Jiho. He answered on the first ring. "Marcus was outside Lee Boyoung's office," she said. A pause. Then, "Are you all right?" He grabbed my arm, not aggressively. He's scared. People who are scared do unpredictable things. "I know." "Where are you now?" "Corner of Seo Chodairo and..." She looked at the street sign, which she could not read. "I don't know, a block from the office. Stay there, I'll send someone." "I don't need..." "Ms. Bennett." His voice was even and quiet and did not leave room for argument. "Marcus knows what you're filing tomorrow. That means the people behind the Mapo project will know within hours, because he will tell them, because he is scared and scared men make the worst decisions. You should not be standing on a street corner in Seocho alone tonight." She looked at the street, at the ordinary movement of an ordinary evening beginning to gather at the edges of the afternoon. "All right," she said. She stood at the corner and waited. Above her, the Seoul sky was going the color of pale iron. Not dark yet, not light. The specific suspended moment between one thing and the next, when everything that is about to happen has already been decided but has not yet arrived. She kept her hand in her pocket, around her phone, and she did not move from the corner, and she watched every face that passed her on the pavement, and she waited for whoever Jiho was sending, because tomorrow morning the application would be filed and the documents would be frozen, and whatever was going to happen after that was going to happen whether she was ready for it or not. And Amara Bennett had survived 6 days in this city on nothing but her own competence and the help of strangers, and she was not going to let fear make her smaller now, when everything she had done since waking up in that empty hotel room had been about refusing to be made smaller. And she stood there at the corner of a street she could not name in a city she had not chosen, waiting, while the sky above Seoul held its breath between day and whatever came. The car that came for her was black and unremarkable, and the man driving it did not introduce himself or speak during the 20-minute ride back to the club. She sat in the back seat and watched Seoul move past the windows, and kept her breathing measured and did not allow herself to think about Marcus's voice breaking on the second asking. She would think about that later. Not now. Jiho was waiting in the club's ground floor when she arrived. Not at the bar, standing near the window that looked out onto the lit garden, his jacket off, his sleeves rolled to the forearm in a way that made him look less like the version of himself that the room usually projected. He looked at her when she came in, and whatever he saw in her face made him not ask the question she could see forming. Instead, he said, "Sit down." "I'm fine." "I know you're fine. Sit down anyway." She sat. The chair nearest the window. The garden lights were on outside, and the glass held her reflection faintly. Her face, her posture, the specific quality of someone who has been holding themselves together through a sustained effort and has not yet decided it's safe to stop. He brought her tea. Not ceremonially. Just set it on the table beside her and sat in the opposite chair and looked at her. "Tell me what he said," Jiho said. She told him. All of it. Marcus's hand on her arm, the urgency she hadn't expected, the admission. "I know what I did." The version of his face she had not seen in years. "Come home." Jiho listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then, "He's going to contact the Mapo partners tonight." "I know. They'll want to know what you're filing and whether it can be stopped." "It can't be stopped. Lee Bo-young submits tomorrow at 9. "They don't know Lee Bo-young is involved. They'll think there's still a window." She looked at the garden. "Which means tomorrow morning is the window where something could happen." "Yes." She picked up the tea, held it. "What kind of something?" "The most likely version is pressure. Someone contacts Lee Bo-young and suggests that taking your case is not in her interest. Someone contacts you and makes the same suggestion with more urgency. And the less likely version?" He looked at her steadily. "The less likely version is that someone decides the cleanest solution is removing the contestation source entirely." She set the tea down. "You're telling me they might try to hurt me. I'm telling you it's possible, and I'm telling you it won't happen, and I'm telling you those two things together so you understand the actual situation rather than a managed version of it." She looked at him for a moment. "You're very specific about what you tell me. You've proven you can handle specific information. Most people don't operate that way. Most people in your situation are not conducting a document fraud contestation 9 days after losing their passport in a foreign country." He paused. "You are not most people." She did not know what to do with that exactly, so she picked up the tea and drank it and looked at the garden. "What happens tomorrow?" she said. "Walk me through it." On-sum. He walked her through it, Lee Bo-young submitting at 9. The court processing time, typically 4 to 6 hours, for emergency freeze applications with strong evidentiary support. And the support was strong. She had the documents. She had the forensic irregularities. She had her own declaratory statement as the purported signatory. The freeze order issued by early afternoon. The Seocho firm notified. The documents flagged in the Korean Commercial Registry. Once that happened, the Mapo project's phase closure was legally impossible until the contestation was resolved. Resolution required a full authentication investigation, which would take months at minimum. During those months, the financial structuring exposure would be visible to the investigating bodies. The transfers below reporting threshold, the routing through intermediate accounts, the structure of the Korean subsidiary, and its relationship to Marcus's U.S. company, all of it would be subject to review. "His U.S. company," she said. "The exposure there. If Korean authorities identify the structuring, do they notify the relevant U.S. financial bodies? Under the bilateral information sharing agreement, yes, there's a mechanism. So the U.S. investigation follows. It's likely." She looked at the table. "His company will not survive a dual investigation. No. Everything he's been building for the past 5 years. Yes." She sat with that. The specific weight of it. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just the particular heaviness of understanding the full scale of what was going to happen. She had not started this wanting to destroy Marcus. She had not woken up in that hotel room with destruction as a goal. She had wanted her passport back. She had wanted her name off documents she had never signed. Everything else was the natural consequence of what he had already set in motion, moving through its logical conclusion, the way a stone moves through water once it's been dropped. "He knows all of this," she said. He knew when he grabbed my arm outside Lee Boyoung's office. He knows what filing tomorrow means for him. Yes. And he still asked me to come home. Jiho was quiet for a moment. What do you make of that? She looked at the garden. I think there's a version of Marcus that genuinely believed he could manage all of this. The Korean operation, the new relationship, removing me cleanly, maintaining some functional connection with me that I would accept because I didn't have full information. I think he believed he could hold all of it simultaneously. She paused. He's very good at holding contradictions. He always was. And now he can't. Now he can't, she said. And he's scared. And scared Marcus asks for things he stopped being entitled to a long time ago. She went upstairs at 10. She lay in the bed above the lit garden, and she did not sleep, but she did not fight it either. She let the sleeplessness be what it was and used the time to think clearly about the next day, what she would do and in what order and what she would need, until she had run through every version of it enough times that it felt less like an unknown and more like a procedure. At 4:15 in the morning, her phone buzzed. A message from a number she did not recognize. Korean characters she could not read, followed by an English translation that she understood immediately was included deliberately, for her. The message said, "The filing tomorrow will create problems that cannot be contained. Consider whether the cost is worth the outcome. There are arrangements that can be made." She stared at the message for a long moment. Then she screenshotted it, forwarded it to Lee Boyoung with a brief note, forwarded it to Jiho, and put the phone face down on the nightstand. She lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling. They had contacted her directly, which meant Marcus had given them her number, which meant whatever conversation he'd had tonight with his partners had included providing them with every piece of access to her that he had. He had handed her over one more time, not physically, not with a letter on a nightstand, but with a phone number and whatever other information they had asked for. She thought about his face outside Lee Boyoung's office. She thought about come home. She thought about the 12 years and the specific arithmetic of how many times she had adjusted herself to accommodate a man who had never once, as far as she could now determine, prioritized her without also prioritizing his own position. She was not angry. She had moved past anger somewhere in the last 6 days. What she had now was something cleaner and more durable. Not forgiveness, which was a different thing and a much longer process, but a clear-eyed acceptance of exactly what Marcus was and what she had been to him, without the distortion of hope. She closed her eyes. At 7, she got up, washed her face, dressed, and went downstairs. Jiho was already in the club's ground floor when she came down, which told her he had also not slept or had slept less than she had. He was on the phone speaking Korean in the low, precise tone she was beginning to recognize as his working register, not the careful English he used with her, but something more clipped and direct. He held up 2 fingers when he saw her, which she interpreted as 2 minutes, and she went to the bar and poured herself coffee from the carafe the morning staff had left. He ended the call. The message came from a burner registered to a logistics company in the Mapo district, he said, which is a subsidiary of one of the Mapo project's investment partners. So it's confirmed. It's confirmed they're watching the situation closely enough to reach out overnight. Will there be more contact? Probably not. They'll have read your non-response as a refusal, which it was. What's the next move from their side? They'll attempt to contact Lee Boyoung's office when it opens. I've already spoken to her. He paused. She's been through this before. She'll be fine. Amara drank her coffee. And me? What do I do between now and when the freeze order is issued? You stay here. You don't go anywhere alone. You don't respond to any contact from any number you don't recognize. And Marcus? Jiho looked at her. What do you want to do about Marcus? She thought about it. Nothing. He's going to have enough to deal with by this afternoon. I don't need to add to it, and I don't need to talk to him. There's nothing left to say that the filing doesn't say more clearly. Jiho nodded. She finished her coffee and set the cup down and looked at the garden through the window. Morning light had reached it. Real morning light. The kind that arrived with the intention of staying. I want to work, she said. While I'm waiting. I need something to do with my hands and my head, or the morning is going to be very long. Choi Seon-hee sent over 3 more database projects. Of course she did. For the first time in a week, something in her chest moved that was not grief or anger or calculation. It was small and it passed quickly. But it was there. She went upstairs, got her notepad, and came back down and started working. Otip. Lee Bo-young called at 9:47. Filed, she said, when Amara answered. The court confirmed receipt. We're in the standard processing window. Any contact from outside? 2 calls to my office this morning before 9. I didn't answer either. My assistant logged the numbers. A pause. Neither one left a message. That tells me they already know what I know, which is that the filing is procedurally clean and there is no legitimate grounds for challenge. So they're looking for another angle. They're looking for leverage they don't have. That tends to produce a particular quality of silence. Lee Bo-young's voice was professionally even. I'll call you when the freeze order is issued. Expect early afternoon. Amara sat with her phone in her hand after the call ended. Filed. She had been in Seoul for 7 days. The freeze order came through at 1:52 in the afternoon. Lee Bo-young called, read her the case number and the order reference, explained that the Seocho firm had been notified and that the documents were now legally frozen pending authentication investigation, and told her that the Korean bar had also been notified of the notarial irregularities on documents 2 and 3, which triggered a separate professional conduct review for the certifying notary. Shin Yuri's certification was now under formal review. Amara wrote down the case number and the order reference in her notepad. She underlined both. What happens now? She said. The investigation proceeds. You'll be required to provide a formal statement, which we'll prepare together in the coming days. Your presence in Korea is actually useful for that. It's easier to process your declaration locally than through the embassy. Lee Bo-young paused. The U.S. financial exposure is a separate process. I have a colleague at a firm in New York who handles these cross-border structures. I'd like to put you in contact with her. Yes, Amara said. Please. She ended the call and sat very still for a moment. Then Marcus called. She looked at his name. She thought about not answering. She answered. It went through, he said. He was not angry. His voice was flat in a way she had not heard before. Not the cold precision, not the careful management, not the urgency of the pavement outside Lee Bo-young's office. Just flat. The specific flatness of someone looking at a situation with no further angles available. Yes, she said. The partners are… He stopped. It doesn't matter what the partners are doing. That's my problem. It is. Silence. The U.S. company, he said. You know what the investigation will find. I have a reasonable picture of it, yes. Everything I've built for the last 5 years. She did not fill the silence. Amara. His voice had something in it she could not immediately name. Not manipulation. She was fairly certain she would recognize that now, in any form he applied it. Something rawer and less strategic. I want you to know that I understand what I did. Not as a legal statement, as I understand what it was, what it cost you, what I was asking you to absorb. She listened. I told myself a lot of things, he said. About the marriage, about what you needed, about why what I was doing was, in some version of the accounting, acceptable. I told myself you'd be fine because you're always fine, because you handle everything, because you've always been the most capable person in any room you're in, and I told myself that meant the damage would be limited. She felt the pressure in her chest that she had been managing for 7 days shift slightly. Not release. Shift. Like weight redistributing. The damage was not limited, she said. I know. And I am not fine because I handle things. I handle things because I've had to. Those are different. I know that too. You knew it when you did it. A long pause. Yes. She closed her eyes briefly, opened them. What do you want from this call, Marcus? Actually, I don't want anything. He stopped. I needed to say it. That's all. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed to say it once without a strategy behind it. She looked at the garden through the window, the afternoon light on the small sculpted shrubs. A bird she did not recognize moving through the frame and out again. I heard you, she said. Okay, and I want you to hear me. What you did was not a mistake. It was not an impulse. It was planned and deliberate, and it used every piece of knowledge you had about me against me, and I want you to hold that accurately. Not as a story about a marriage that fell apart, as what it was. His breathing on the other end of the line was audible. I will, he said. She believed him. In the specific and limited way she believed people who had just had the consequences of their actions arrive and found the experience clarifying. She did not believe it would last. She did not need it to last. "Don't call me again," she said. "Not until there's a legal reason to. And when there is, go through the attorneys." She ended the call. She sat with the phone in her lap and her hands open on her thighs, and she breathed. The garden outside was very quiet. The afternoon was moving the way afternoons move when the thing you have been working toward has arrived, and the adrenaline has nowhere left to go, and the body begins, slowly and without ceremony, to remember that it is tired. She was very tired. She let herself feel that, all of it. The 7 days and the nights, and the hotel room and the convenience store, Ramyeon, and the embassy waiting room and the library terminal and the back office workstation and the pavement outside the club, and Marcus's hand on her arm and his voice breaking on the second asking, and Lee Bo-young reading her the case number, and none of it, not one piece of it, the way she would have chosen to spend a week in a foreign city. She sat in the chair by the window, and she let herself be tired, and for the first time in 7 days she did not make a list. Jiho found her there an hour later. He came in quietly and sat in the opposite chair without turning on any additional lights, and looked at her and did not speak for a moment. "It's done," she said. "Yes." "The partner, what are they doing?" "Managing. They'll restructure around the Mapo project's delay. They're not destroyed by this. These are people who have survived worse. But Marcus's role in the structure is no longer useful to them. He's an exposure now. So he loses their protection. He never had their protection. He had their partnership. That's different." She understood the distinction. "And Shin Yuri," she said, "the bar review will take months. Her certification is suspended pending the investigation, which means she cannot notarize anything in Korea during that period." He paused. "She contacted Oh Dae-jung's attorney this morning. It appears she and Marcus had a disagreement about the scope of her involvement." Amara looked at him. "She didn't know he was going to leave me in Seoul. She knew he was ending the marriage. She did not, apparently, know he intended to do it in a manner that would place her professional certification on forged documents in a contested legal proceeding. She thought she was helping build a life." "It appears so." Amara looked at the garden. She did not feel anything particular about Shin Yuri, not sympathy and not satisfaction. Just the neutral acknowledgement that there were multiple people in this story who had been managing their own versions of a man who specialized in giving people the version of himself they most needed to see. "She made her own choices," Amara said. "She did. Including the certification. Including that." They sat in silence for a moment. The kind of silence that has texture, not uncomfortable, not requiring filling, just two people in a room at the end of a long and particular day. "What do you do now?" Jiho said. "Actually, past the legal process." She had been thinking about this. Not anxiously, just practically, the way she thought about most things. She had emergency documentation that would be ready Saturday. She had a legal case in process that required her presence in Seoul for the foreseeable weeks. She had no apartment, no employment, and no professional network in this city. She also had 11 years of compliance expertise, a working relationship with the operations manager of a private members club in Gangnam, a clearer picture of her own capabilities than she'd had in years, and the specific knowledge, hard-won and not abstract, that she could function at a high level in genuinely adverse conditions. "I need to work," she said, "properly, not cash-in-hand database projects. Your visa category doesn't permit employment." "I know, but it permits consulting. If I'm engaged as a consultant by a Korean entity for a defined project, that's within tourist visa parameters for short-term engagement." She paused. "I need to verify the specific legal language, but I believe it holds." Jiho looked at her with the quality of attention she was beginning to recognize as his version of being impressed, which expressed itself not as enthusiasm, but as a slight increase in stillness. Choi Seon-hee has been talking about bringing in an external compliance review for the club's financial reporting structure, he said. "She mentioned it to me 6 months ago, and I told her to find someone qualified. I'm qualified. I know you are. And that's not you offering me a favor. It's me telling you what Choi Seon-hee needs. Whether she hires you is her decision." Amara looked at him. "You're very careful about the line between what you decide and what other people decide. I found it keeps things cleaner. In your line of work. In general, She almost smiled. Not quite. The muscles moved in the right direction and then settled back. I'll talk to Choi Seon-hee, she said. Well, she talked to Choi Seon-hee the following morning in the hotel's back office over terrible coffee from the same amenity basket she had been raiding for a week. The operations manager listened to the consulting proposal with the same brisk efficiency she applied to everything, asked 3 very specific questions about Amara's previous compliance frameworks and deliverable timelines, and then said, 2 months, fixed engagement. I'll have the contract language drafted by Friday. I haven't told you my rate, Amara said. I looked up your previous firm and your title level. I have a reasonable estimate. Choi Seon-hee looked at her over the coffee cup. Is it accurate? Amara told her the number. Choi Seon-hee did not blink. Friday, she said. Contract language by Friday. Amara walked out of the hotel into the Seoul morning with a consulting engagement, a legal case in process, emergency documentation ready for pickup in 2 hours, and the particular specific feeling of someone who has found their feet under them in conditions that were designed to make standing impossible. She stood on the pavement outside the hotel and breathed the morning air, cool, faintly exhausted, carrying the particular mix of traffic and food vendors and something green from somewhere she couldn't identify. And she let herself have exactly 30 seconds of feeling it. Not triumph, something quieter. The satisfaction of competence exercised under pressure. The particular relief of discovering that the skills you spent a decade building do not disappear just because someone tried to convince you that you didn't need them. 30 seconds. Then she started walking toward the embassy. Her emergency documentation was processed and ready at 11:15. The officer who handed it over was not Carson, a younger man who checked her information against the file and signed the release form without particular expression, doing his job efficiently and without ceremony, which was exactly right. She stood outside the embassy with a valid travel document in her hand. She could leave. That was the first thought, clear and immediate. She had what she had come here for. The thing Marcus had taken, restored. She could book a flight. She could be in Baltimore in 14 hours. She could sleep in her own bed, see her own things, breathe air that was familiar. She stood on the pavement and thought about it seriously, the way she thought about every option, not dismissing it because it felt like retreat, but actually weighing it. Baltimore. Her apartment. The professional network she had let go dormant. The friends she had been slowly losing contact with over the years of the marriage. She could feel now, with the clarity that distance produces, how much of that isolation had been engineered, how much of her social world had been subtly redirected toward Marcus's needs and preferences until her own had become vestigial. She could go back to that. She could rebuild it. She had rebuilt things before. Or, she looked at the Seoul Street. She thought about 7 days, the library terminal, the back office. Lee Bo-young's clean, functional office and the documents spread across the desk. The Gangnam pavement at 10 at night. The chair by the window above the lit garden. Choi Seon-hee saying Friday, contract language by Friday, without blinking. She thought about Ji-ho saying you are not most people with the specific quality of someone who was not flattering her but simply noting what he had observed. She thought about the consulting contract, the legal case that required her presence. The 2 months of defined work in a city she was beginning to know the shape of. She put the documentation in her bag. She took out her phone and called Ji-ho. He answered on the second ring. I have my documentation, she said. Good. I'm not going home. A brief pause. Not surprised. Something more like confirmation. All right. I need to find an apartment. Short-term rental. I can't stay at the club indefinitely. I know someone who manages short-term furnished rentals in Mapo. I'll send you the contact. Ji-ho. Yes. I need to ask you something directly. Ask? What do you want from me? Not from the Mapo situation. That's done? Or close enough? Not the information I had about Marcus's organizational patterns. From me, specifically, going forward. I need to know what this is. The pause was longer this time. She could hear him breathing. Measured, deliberate, the breath of someone who was choosing words carefully, not because he was being evasive, but because the answer mattered to him and he didn't want to get it wrong. I don't know yet, he said. That's an honest answer. I know what I've observed about you over the past 7 days. I know that you are the first person in a significant amount of time whose thinking I find genuinely interesting. I know that there is no version of what I want that involves you being here because you have nowhere else to go. He paused again. That's as specific as I can be right now. She stood on the pavement outside the embassy with Seoul traffic moving past her. That's more specific than most people manage, she said. I'm aware you'd know if I was managing you. Yes, she said. I would. Then you know I'm not. She looked at the street. A woman about her age walked past pushing a stroller, talking on her phone, entirely absorbed in whatever she was saying, her face animated and present. Ordinary life moving through an ordinary morning. Send me the rental contact, she said. I'll look at the apartment this afternoon. I'll let him know you're coming. She ended the call and stood there for another moment. The documentation was in her bag. The consulting contract was coming Friday. The legal case was moving through its proper channels. Marcus was somewhere in this city dealing with the consequences of 18 months of deliberate construction, and whatever he was feeling about those consequences was his to carry now. Not hers, not a problem she was responsible for absorbing. She started walking. But the apartment was in a narrow building in Mapo, on the 5th floor, with windows that looked out over a street market that ran along the block below. It was small, a single room with a sleeping area separated by a low shelf, a bathroom with a window, a kitchen that was functional and nothing more. The floors were wood, the walls were white. It had been furnished minimally and well, with the particular taste of someone who understood that short-term tenants needed function more than decoration. It was nothing like the 14th-floor luxury suite where she had woken up 7 days ago to find her husband gone. She liked it immediately. She paid the first month's deposit from the emergency funds the embassy had advanced her. She would pay it back. She had already started a repayment schedule. And took the key and stood in the empty apartment and looked around at what was hers. Temporary, small, earned. She set her bag down on the table by the window. Below, the street market was in full swing, vendors calling, shoppers moving through. The specific busy noise of commerce and negotiation, and people going about their days in the ordinary way that people go about their days in cities that do not know or care about the particular catastrophes occurring within their boundaries. She watched it for a while. Then she unpacked. It took 11 minutes because she did not have much. What she had was what she had carried. The clothes from the luxury hotel suitcase, the notepad with 6 days of documentation, her phone, her laptop that she had never stopped having because Marcus had not thought to take it, and the emergency documentation that said she was who she was in a country where she had not planned to stay. She put everything in its place, folded, charged, set on the table. Then she sat down in the chair by the window and did nothing for a while. Not thinking, not listening, not planning, just sitting with the city noise below her and the afternoon light coming through the window at an angle that caught the dust in the air and made it visible. Small floating particles moving in no particular direction, suspended in the light, belonging to no one. She had been married for 12 years. She thought about what that meant now, with the clarity she had not been able to apply while she was inside it. Not the failure of it. She was not interested in accounting for the marriage's failure as a personal deficit, but the substance of it. What she had actually been doing with 12 years of her life, and how much of that she had chosen with full information and how much she had been maneuvered into. The career she had scaled back. She had been good at that work. She had been, as she had told Choi Seon-hee, qualified, genuinely, at a high level, in ways that translated directly to use in the real world, as the past week had proven with more clarity than any performance review she had ever received. She had stepped back from that because Marcus had framed it as a mutual decision, and she had trusted him, and she had let herself believe that his priorities and her priorities were the same. She would not make that mistake again, not because she was closing herself off, not because the marriage had taught her to distrust everyone, but because she now understood, in her body, in a way that abstract knowledge had never quite produced, the difference between choosing to share your life with someone and being slowly persuaded to surrender it to them. The difference between partnership and absorption. She would know the difference now. She looked at the street market below and thought about 12 years, and she felt the grief of it, clean, direct, without the distortion of anger, the grief of time and energy and a certain kind of hope that had been real even if what it was placed in had not been. She felt it fully, there in the chair by the window, with the afternoon light moving across the floor. Then she got up, went to the kitchen, filled the kettle, and made tea. Jiho came to the apartment 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening, when she had been at the Seocho firm for a full-day deposition session with Lee Boyoung and had come home with 2 takeout containers from the market below and a headache that lived exactly behind her left eye. She heard the knock and knew it was him. She had told him the address, and he had not come by unannounced until now, which told her that the quality of his restraint was intentional. She opened the door. He looked at her face. Hard day. Long day. Come in. He came in and looked around the apartment the way he looked at everything. Thoroughly, without appearing to. She had been here 3 weeks, and it had accumulated the specific texture of habitation. A scarf on the hook by the door, books from the Mappo library on the low shelf, a plant she had bought from the market below because the wall needed something living. You've made it yours, he said. It's temporary. Things can be both. She handed him one of the takeout containers and a pair of chopsticks, and they ate standing at the kitchen counter, which was the only real surface in the apartment, because she had not yet bought a second chair. The deposition, he said. How did it go? Lee Boyoung is very good at her job, she said. The authentication investigators found a third irregularity in the documents that I hadn't caught. The pressure pattern on the notarial seal is inconsistent with Shin Yuri's other certified documents from the same period. She paused. It looks like she was rushed, which means Marcus set the timeline without giving her adequate preparation. He was moving people faster than they were comfortable with. He always did, she said. It was one of his modes. If you kept everyone slightly off balance, you maintained the space to make decisions before anyone had time to ask questions. Jiho ate his food and looked at the window. The market was closing below. The vendors packing up, the light changing as the stalls came down. The U.S. inquiry, he said. Your New York contact. She's filed a preliminary information request with the relevant financial bodies. The bilateral process is slower than the Korean side, but it's moving. Marcus's company is in the process of being examined, yes. She set her chopsticks down. I want to be clear about something. I didn't do any of this to destroy him. I know. I did it because my name was on those documents and I needed it removed. Everything else is the consequence of what he built. I know, Jiho said again, not dismissively. With the particular quality of actually knowing, having thought about it, having understood it already. You're not going to tell me I should feel good about it, she said. No. Most people would say I should. Vindication. Justice. Most people aren't doing what you're doing, he said. Most people would have been on a plane home on day 2. She looked at her food. I thought about it. On day 6, when I had the documentation. He looked at her. What kept you? She thought about how to answer that honestly. I was tired of running toward things I was told were safe and away from things I was told were dangerous. The marriage was supposed to be safe. Coming home would have been supposed to be safe. She paused. I wanted to stay somewhere I had chosen, even if what I had chosen was hard. He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, it was carefully, the way he spoke when the words mattered to him. There's something I should tell you. She looked at him. The man who managed the Mappo project's financial structure, one of the senior partners, called me 2 weeks ago. He wanted to know my position on you, whether I was protecting you as an asset or as something else. What did you tell him? I told him that the question was irrelevant because the filing had already been submitted and that any action taken against you would be treated as an action against me. She held his gaze. You put yourself in the middle of that for me. You were already in the middle of it. That's not the same as you putting yourself there. No, he said, it's not. The market below had gone almost fully quiet. The street was settling into its evening register, quieter, slower, the particular sound of a neighborhood finding its nighttime rhythm. Why? She said, not aggressively, genuinely. He set his chopsticks down on the counter and looked at her directly, the way he looked at most things, without performance, without softening. Because you sat in my associate's hotel and turned a broken database into a structural analysis in one day, when you had no passport and no money, and had just been abandoned in a foreign city by someone who was supposed to love you, and you did it without asking anyone to admire you for it. You just did it because it needed doing. He paused. I have spent most of my adult life in rooms full of people who are performing strength. It is a very different thing from actually having it. She looked at him for a long moment. I'm not a simple situation, she said. I'm not asking for simple. My life is currently a legal proceeding in 2 countries. I know, and I'm building something here from nothing, which means I don't have time or bandwidth for things that aren't real. I'm aware of that. She looked at the window. The last light of the market reflected faintly in the glass. I'm not going to need you to protect me. I appreciate what you did, but I'm not going to build something that requires your protection to function. I'm not offering protection, he said. I'm offering company. There's a difference. She looked back at him. She thought about the 12 years. The 12 years of adjusting and accommodating and believing that what was offered was what was meant. She thought about how long it had taken her to understand the distance between what Marcus said and what Marcus was. She looked at Jiho and she applied the same assessment she applied to everything now, not with suspicion, but with clarity. What she saw was someone who had told her the truth consistently, in a specific and useful way, without requiring her gratitude or her deference or her diminishment. That was not nothing. I'm not ready for anything, she said. I know. That's not a soft no. I know that too. It's an accurate description of where I am. Then I'll stay where I am, he said, and we'll see what happens. She almost smiled. The muscles moved the same direction they had in the club 3 weeks ago, and this time they did not quite settle back. Okay, she said. He picked up his chopsticks and finished his food and looked out the window at the closed market, and she stood beside him at the counter, and they were quiet together in the apartment above the Mapo Street. And it was not everything, and it was not simple, and it was not the ending of anything she had ever imagined for herself. It was what she had built, day by day, in the city where she had been left for dead. Months later, in the early morning when the light was just arriving, Amara sat on the apartment's narrow balcony with tea and looked at the street below and thought about the woman she had been when she arrived. Not with pity, not even with the particular tenderness that people sometimes feel for earlier versions of themselves, just with the plain recognition of what was true. She had arrived without a passport and without money and without anyone in this city who knew her name. She had been placed here deliberately by someone who knew her well enough to calculate exactly how much pressure it would take to make her collapse. She had not collapsed, not because she was exceptional, not because she had some quality that other people lacked, but because the skills she had built over a lifetime of learning to function under difficulty had turned out, when she needed them, to actually work. That was the thing she had not known for certain until now, that the discipline was real, that the competence was real, that the part of her that could look at a broken system and find its structural failures was not just a professional attribute, but a way of being in the world that applied beyond spreadsheets and compliance reports. She had survived 7 days in Seoul on 1101 and a notepad. She had turned that into a consulting contract, a legal case that was resolving in her favor across 2 countries, an apartment she paid for herself, and a life that was, for the first time in 12 years, organized entirely around what she needed and wanted rather than around the management of someone else's preferences. Marcus's company was in the process of a financial investigation that would take another year at minimum to resolve. He was back in the United States. He had not called since the day she told him to go through attorneys. His attorney had called Lee Boyoung twice. Lee Boyoung had handled it efficiently and without sentiment. Shin Yuri's professional certification had been suspended for 6 months pending the conduct review. She had, according to Lee Boyoung's sources, stopped working with Oh Dae-jung's firm entirely. Whatever she had believed she was building with Marcus, the building had stopped. Oh Dae-jung himself had cooperated with the Korean investigation in exchange for a reduced exposure agreement, which had produced considerably more information about the Mapo project's investment structure than anyone, including Jiho, had expected. That information was still moving through its own process, separate from Amara's case, resolving the way these things resolved, slowly, expensively, with the specific grinding quality of legal machinery that does not rush for anyone. She drank her tea and watched the street below come alive, the market vendors arriving with their carts, the early commuters moving through. A child being walked to school by a grandmother who held the child's hand with the particular grip of someone who had been doing it long enough that the grip was unconscious. Just the natural configuration of that hand when that child was nearby. Amara watched them until they turned the corner and disappeared. She thought about what Jiho had said 3 weeks ago. Things can be both. She had not stopped thinking about that intermittently, in the way that a phrase lodges in you when it lands on something true, temporary and claimed at the same time, chosen and uncertain at the same time, unfinished and already worth having at the same time. She thought about silence. She had spent her life being told, in various ways, that her silence was a problem to be solved, that her calm was coldness, that her composure was withdrawal. Marcus had used it against her, had built his exit strategy around it, had calculated that the same discipline that made her good at her work would slow her response to his betrayal long enough for him to get clear. He had been partly right and entirely wrong. The silence had slowed her initial response, yes, and then the silence had become the thing she worked inside, the quality of attention she brought to every database, every document, every conversation with a man whose name made rooms go still. The thing that let her sit in an embassy waiting room without panic and read a Korean legal document without losing herself in the implications and stand on a pavement outside a lawyer's office while her husband asked her to come home and hear every word he said and feel every weight it carried and keep walking anyway. She was not going to stop being quiet. She was not going to perform expressiveness she did not feel or manufacture a different version of herself to replace the one that Marcus had tried to use as a weapon. The silence was hers. It had always been hers, built not from fear or numbness, but from the specific discipline of a woman who had learned early that how you felt and how you functioned were two different instruments that could be played at the same time. She had just been playing one too loudly and the other too quietly for someone else's benefit. That was over. She finished her tea, set the cup on the balcony railing. Below, the street was fully awake now, the city indifferent and relentless and moving without her contribution or her permission or her awareness of 9/10 of what was happening in it, as cities do, as they had done. The morning she woke up alone in a 14th floor room with an envelope on the nightstand. She was still here. Not because anyone had saved her, not because she had been lucky, though she had been, in the specific ways that matter, in finding Park Junseo's professional decency, in finding Choi Seon-hee's particular quality of practical respect, in finding a man whose name commanded rooms and who had told her the truth when he had no obligation to. But she was still here primarily because of herself, because of the 1101 and the notepad and the 6 pages of compliance analysis and the steady refusal to let the shape of her situation become the ceiling of her response to it. She stood up from the balcony chair. She went inside. She washed the cup, set it on the rack, picked up her bag, and left the apartment, locking the door behind her with the key that was hers, in the building she had chosen, in the city where she had been placed and where she had planted herself anyway, in the life that was small and unfinished and entirely, completely, without compromise or apology, her own,